So I'm going to introduce our next speaker. I mentioned his name earlier, Justin Rounce from TechnipFMC. Again, the story that he'll share with us, in my view, is quite rare, a genuinely complete lean business transformation, not just in one function, not just on the shop floor, but really across the entire enterprise. Justin is the Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at TechnipFMC, a global energy technology company. Under the leadership of their CEO and executives like Justin, as I've said, TechnipFMC has been transforming itself enterprise-wide through lean. Their work is disrupting and reshaping the energy sector. I mean, it's that influential. It's amazing. It's a powerful example of what a lean enterprise can actually look like when the commitment is total. And so with that, please welcome Justin Rounce.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Houston. As you can tell, I am a native Houstonian. Come from slightly east of Texas. But lovely to have you in our town here. I have a story that doesn't span 30 years, such as Steve. But I still have a challenge of cramming 4 or 5 years into 30 minutes. So I'll do my best. Well, let me just tell you a little bit about our company. We're an energy technology company, but we really specialize in working in the most hostile environment on the planet, which is underwater. And what we do is we build massive systems that sit 2-3 miles underwater on the seabed that are designed to operate for 25 years without intervention. So it's kind of complex, and it's hard to imagine the size and the scale. I put the little Eiffel Tower here, and if anybody's been to Paris, they know the Eiffel Tower is pretty high, and if you stacked 20-plus Eiffel Towers on top of each other, that's kind of the water depths that we're dealing with. So obviously, human intervention is not possible. Everything is controlled remotely, either using subsea robotics or subsea controls and automation systems. And the size, not just the water depth, but the size of the infrastructure we put in is almost like a city. You know, sometimes we're installing equipment in areas that would be 4 or 5 times bigger than New York City. So massive infrastructure on the seabed. So we live underwater. People in the industry, they kind of take the mickey out of us. They say we've got webbed feet. They're probably right. Everything we do, we think about from the seafloor upwards. And so that's a little bit about our company. And, you know, we had lean in manufacturing for many years. I mean, probably 10, 15 years we've been practicing lean in manufacturing. But we found an application to apply lean differently. And our industry, it's an old industry. We've been around. You know, the energy industry's been around a long time, but subsea has been around probably about 30 or 40 years. And over that period of time, we found ourselves in a situation where every project we did was different from the last one. And here's a great example. This is a piece of equipment that sits on the seabed. When you drill a well, you put on top of that well to control the oil and gas production what is called a subsea tree. And the functionality of subsea trees is the same for every single project. But for every single project, our customers felt the need to do re-engineering. And I'm an engineer. We can't help ourselves. We love to just re-engineer stuff. And so that led to increases in cycle time. It led to decreases in predictability and reliability. And there was a kind of a pivotal report that was published in 2014 that said the average subsea project for the industry was typically somewhere between 1 to 2 years late and 50 to 100% over budget. And that was the average. And so we had to do something differently. And we decided to start with the technology. And we leveraged LPPD to try and give ourselves the challenge, our engineers have challenged us saying, can you take that subsea tree, which consists of about 2,000 to 3,000 parts, and can we make it standard and configurable And can we reduce the size by half? Can we reduce the cost by half? And can we reduce the part count by half? And of course, our engineers said, impossible. This cannot be done. But we took the challenge on nonetheless. And this is the first time we used LPPD, or Lean Process and Product Development, as a tool, a scientific tool, to help us achieve that. And we learned a lot through that process. And here you see the result. This is what we call Subsea 2.0. And indeed, 4 years of hard work and effort. And we were able to achieve 50% size, 50% cost, and 50% part count on a very complex piece of equipment. So we learned a lot through that, but what we really learned was a different way of thinking, a different mindset. And the story is really not about technology. It's really about people, and it's really about a cultural shift. And that really started back in this development when we used LPPD, and we all started to think, oh, this is a different way of thinking. And so we asked ourselves the question, can we do more with Lean? Can we operate differently using Lean? So we took the decision to run an experiment where we would take a business unit of our company, and we would operate using the tools and methods of Lean. Not just technology, but we would operate the whole business that way. And so we took a decision, this was at the end of 2021, early 2022, to gather the leadership team and kind of socialize the idea of changing the way we work. We worked together for 6 months to develop what we call the True North, a value-driven purpose. And we made some big decisions. So firstly, we kind of developed this, what we called enterprise transformation as a design project. What are the elements of it? What are the functions? And we all signed it. Myself, my team, and my counterparts team, we all signed it to say that I'm in. And I don't know who wrote, "I love you guys." Was that you, Paolo? Did you write? Someone wrote, "I love you guys." They were really into it. But we signed it as a commitment, and then we took some big decisions. We said, we're not going to do PowerPoint anymore. PowerPoint is killed, banned. PowerPoint is no more. We canceled every single business review and every single project review. And we decided we were going to move to visual management. So we created our first obeyers. We had obeyers in manufacturing, but as a operating unit, we didn't have obeyers. So we created our first obeyers. And we said, that's the only way we're going to work. And then we went to our calendars. I personally went to my calendar, and I canceled at least 40% of the meetings and reviews that I had scheduled for the next 3 months. And we said, if we need to discuss something that would typically be in a biz review or in a PowerPoint, we're going to go to the obeyer and discuss it there. So we ran the experiment. We really learned a lot. We ran it for a year. We made lots of mistakes. We did lots of PDCA. We had lots of help from many companies in this room who came and helped us. But we found that we actually were performing better. All of the things that Steve talked about in his book, we started to experience. And we got to the point where we felt, as an organization, we can actually run the whole company this way. So that was an interesting conversation with the executive team. Guys, we've learned this. We're going to run the company like this. Our CEO was on board-ish at the time, but very supportive. So we took the top 120 leaders in the company. We brought them to Houston. It's the beginning of 2023, 2022, 23, beginning of that year, whichever year it was. And we shared the news that we're going to completely change the operating model of the company. And the reaction was, wait, what? We're going to do what? And we kind of explained the methodology, and a lot of people were sitting on their hands through the meeting, staring at their feet. 2 days of quite challenging conversations. And at the end of it, we kind of did this informal exit poll and said, okay, back to the poster. I'm in. How many are in? Well, about 10% people said, okay, we're sort of in. They were probably the 10% that were already involved in the first year's experiment. And the rest of them were like, I'm absolutely out. So sitting on my hands. And that was a big moment for us. Like, okay, have we completely lost the plot, or should we persist? And we decided we were going to persist. So we did a lot in the next year. We said, okay, we're going to go ahead and carry on. We developed a company true north, so a kind of a value-driven purpose for the company, outlining the things we wanted to focus on. We deployed obeyers everywhere in the company. We trained, we mentored, we coached. We had a lot of support from the LEI and from other companies in the room who came and helped us. We launched some what we call tips. We identified several real problems we wanted to solve, and we decided rather than going, broad and shallow, we're going to go deep and narrow on several topics as real case studies and proof points on how Lean could help us really solve enterprise problems. And so we launched tips, and we gave them a lot of attention. And then we introduced the concept that many of you know of the inverted pyramid. We started to coach people on the more senior you are in the company, the lower you are on the pyramid, and the sharp end's at the bottom, and the people doing the work, they're at the top. Our job is to support them. The rest of this is just waste and overhead. If you're not adding value to the people doing the work, then you're in the wrong company. And that was a big mind shift for us. Everybody had worked in the old way of working, where the pyramid was kind of the right way up. So a lot of changes there. We introduced something called a small book of simple big rules. 10 rules. That's all you had to remember. 10 rules. And we went around and we socialized. Actually, we got the book and we did kind of group reading. And we sat down with our teams and we read the book together. And they sat down with their teams. They read the book together. And they said, look, come on, there's 10 things we need to do here. They're simple, big rules that would drive our transformation. And the other thing we did for a year is live on a plane. We traveled, and this is just a few examples of more than 200 obeyers now we have in the company, from the CEO and the team all the way down to the people on the shop floor doing their daily work. We traveled and we coached. We gave feedback. We participated. One of the interesting things, I was really laughing when Steve was talking about the shades of yellow. We had lots of, in the early days of obeyers, we had lots of greens, lots of yellows, and a few reds. And it didn't take us very long to, come to the same conclusion that, what do I do with yellow? I don't know what to do with yellow. So we banned yellow in the company. There is no yellow allowed in the company. You're either red or you're green. And if you're green, that's great. We're not going to talk about that. If you're red, how can I help? What can we do? And then people did different shades of red, and it's like, look, it's just red. It's just red or it's green, period. So we've got a lot better at that. And we had to learn how to provide help. And I can tell you personally, it took me a long time to get used to firstly seeing red and then providing help. Because in the beginning, my way to provide help was, okay, you're red, so here's 15 questions about your red and 3 more things I want you to go and do, and come back once you've got the answers to those. And that poor individual would be like, oh, great, that was really helpful, I got 3 more things to do now that I didn't have time to do in the first place. So we've had to really learn how to help people when they ask for help. And typically they're either asking for knowledge, they're asking for resources, that may be people or finance. They're not asking for too many things. So we had to teach people how to ask for the right things, and we had to learn how to provide the right help. I've condensed a year into a few moments, but it was a lot of work, a lot of effort from the whole team. At the end of that year, we gathered the same 120 people back together. And some really fundamental things happened at that meeting. The first thing that happened was they provided us feedback on what they had learned, their experiences. And probably the most important thing is our CEO stood up and said, I am convinced. I'm convinced this is the only way we're going to run our company. And this is an opportunity for you to be part of that. And if you don't want to be part of that, that is okay. We will help you go somewhere else and be successful. But in our company, this is how we're going to work. Period, full stop. and as such an important statement. At the end of that meeting, we did a similar informal exit. About 80% of the people were fully vested and fully on board. Still, we had 20% that weren't entirely convinced. And so our job was to either convince them or help them, as the CEO said, move on to something that would be more aligned with the way that they thought. So a big shift in a year, a big effort, but we were still very, very immature in that journey. As we moved past that and we said, okay, what do we really need to do next is we really need to build a roadmap. And someone talked about a roadmap this morning in terms of where we were gonna go. It's a very extensive roadmap. You see it started all the way back in 21 and then all the way through to 26. And there's lots of things on here. It was incredibly ambitious. But we created it, we visualized it, we socialized it. It was in every wall in the company. And I'd say we did okay. There's lots of things that we didn't achieve on the roadmap. And some things we decided, wow, we can't do that now. Let's push that to the right. We're not quite ready. And there were some things we actually did earlier. But at least this gave everybody a common understanding of where we were going and what we were trying to achieve as a company. And you can see it enter 2026, and myself and Paolo Couto over there and a few others in our organization, we're in the process right now of building the next 3 years in terms of what are the big things we want to achieve between now and the end of the decade. So that was an important communication tool so everybody could see what we were trying to achieve. And then it's kind of interesting. We reached a point about 2 years in. I would say for the first 2 years, we were pushing the bus. I mean, there was a few of us and then more of us pushing the bus. And then I remember a conversation, again, with my colleague Paolo Couto here, not so long ago, saying, wow, this thing is, like the bus has left the station. We're hanging on to the bus now. All of a sudden, it started to become viral. And I give all the credit to the 22,000 women and men in our company that they really bought in, they really believed, and they started to take lean in directions that we hadn't even imagined. It was becoming a kind of self-fulfilling thing. And that's when we realized, this is great, but we probably need an enterprise management system, otherwise we're gonna have kind of free electrons all over the place. So that's when we reached out again to LEI. To Lisa and her team were very helpful at Cleveland Clinic. They had a much more mature management system than we did. So we took those lessons learned from lots of companies here, and we developed our own enterprise management system. It's not a very good picture of a spine. It's maybe for the healthcare professionals in the room, they could tell me what was wrong with this, but it's supposed to be a spine and the backbone of the company. But it had 7 simple, it feels like my spine actually. So 7 simple things in there that we really wanted. So the first was obviously leadership behaviors. I'll come back to that because we spend a lot of time on that. Value-driven purpose. Visual management is the only way we're going to operate through obeyers. Routines, daily routines. Lisa talked about daily routines, weekly routines, stand up every day and have a discussion. Problem solving. We learned through the first 3 years we were not very good at problem solving. We had to get better at problem solving. And so we started to spend a lot of time investing a lot of time in becoming better problem solvers. And the help chain was there, but it wasn't as good as we wanted it to be. And so we had to do a lot of work on the help chain. And then we had lots of work standards in our company. We didn't have a lot of standard work. They're not the same thing. So we had to really invest in standard work. And that's an ongoing process. We still have a lot to do on standard work. I said I'd come back to behaviors. The other thing we did is we simplified our leadership standard to this. We created a new leadership standard and said we only want 5 things in our leadership standard. We want leaders to exhibit 3 behaviors and have 2 capabilities. The first behavior is value-driven purpose. Every obey you go to, every meeting you go to, what is the value-driven purpose? Whether you're a machinist on the shop floor, machining, or whether you're sitting on the back of a vessel in the middle of the ocean doing an installation campaign, or whether you sit in a corporate office, what is What is your purpose and how do you add value to the company? Ask and listen. Again, you heard it this morning. You have to get better at asking and listening, going to the Gemba, asking good questions, showing respect, and really go to the people's place of work. I think there's nothing, there's no greater way you can show your appreciation for the frontline workers in the company is to go to their place of work and ask them how you can help them improve. And it's very rewarding. By the way, I started in the field. I spent 7 years in the field, so I love going to the field. I love going to manufacturing locations. I love going to the service locations because it kind of takes me back to where I began. So there's no better way to show people they're appreciated to go to their place of work. So ask and listen, and then, of course, make problems visible. And again, we're still learning on how to make problems visible. It's a journey, but you have to start and you have to improve. So these were the 3 behaviors, and then the capabilities, problem solving. Again, we need to get better at problem solving. And then Lisa talked about this again, cross-functional connectivity. In the early days of our obeyers, you'd walk into an obeyer and you could see all the functions on the wall. And it took us probably the best part of a year through quarterly PDCA to say, you know what, that's not how we run the business. We don't run the business that way. So we pretty much kind of changed our obeyers now to be only cross-functional. The functions are really lost within the workflow or the work streams that get delivered, whichever level the obeyer is at. So that was a big learning for us. We're still improving. We still have a lot to do on cross-functional connectivity, but we're a lot better than we were a couple of years ago. So they were the big things we rolled out as part of the enterprise management system. So where are we now? This is kind of, again, 3 or 4 years condensed into a few minutes. We've deployed all these things. We continue to progress. We do lots and lots of PDCA at every level because we realize that we're learning. And we know we have a lot more to achieve. I presented to our board of directors about this time last year, and they kind of said, where are you on this journey? They're really fascinated to see how things are improving. And I said, I feel like we're climbing Everest, and I think we're at base camp 1. And one of the directors says, well, how many base camps are there? I'm like, I don't know, there's 11 or something, I don't know. But we're at 1, we're solidly at 1. And I think if you ask me where we are now, I think we've left base camp 1 and we're on to the next base camp, but we have a lot more to do. We have a lot more to learn. But we are seeing the impact of these changes. And if you look at the performance of our company since we started this journey at the end of 2022, this is our share price compared to our peer group. And by the OSX, by the way, is an index that encompasses all of the oil and gas technology companies. And I think, therefore, you can see the results speak for themselves. Now, I would hesitate to say this is not 100% of our change to lean and our operating system. We have unique technologies. We have a unique integrated business model that differentiates us from the competition. But I would also argue that our decision to move to a lean operating model 3 years ago has been foundational to this success. And I think the other thing to note is as we've grown, we've managed to double the revenue of the company during this period. We've doubled the EBITDA margin of our company in this period. And we've not added CapEx, we've not added OpEx, and we've not added people. So we're doing more with the same because we've removed all the things that we shouldn't do, that were wasteful and not helpful. We've delayered our organization, we've flattened the organization, and lean is the model we're using to run the whole company today. And when I say the whole company, I mean the whole company. It's finance, it's HR, it's IT. It's every single person in every single function in the company is operating like this today. And that's a lot to do in 3 years. And as I said, we still have a long way to go. But we're definitely on the right path. But I would say we are dissatisfied. We're relentlessly dissatisfied. because we know we can do a lot more. And so, we will get to base camp 2, and eventually we'll get to the top of Everest, and then we'll go pick the next biggest mountain to climb. I'm sure some of you in the room is going like, okay, Everest is the biggest mountain, so once you get to the top of that one, what's next? Well, actually, Everest is not the biggest mountain. The biggest mountain is an extinct volcano off the coast of Hawaii that's 33,000 feet high, and it happens to be underwater on the seabed. I'm okay with that because we got webbed feet, so that's our next challenge. But I think that's all I wanted to share with you today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, but thank you for listening.
Great, thank you. Let me take that.
Yeah.
So we do have some time with Justin.
I didn't have to sing karaoke, which
ask
is a
some
blessing.
questions. That's right. It was a great karaoke routine. Thank
Yeah.
you for entertaining everyone. Thanks for the questions that you submitted already. Feel free to submit some more, and you can vote the questions that have been submitted up or down to give us a sense of just the collective group's interest. I'm going to start with a quick question that from me, that comes out of a call that we had recently around like the timing of a lot of this story that you shared and sort of the business conditions context that was in place at the time that you made that decision to make Lean your operating system.
Yeah.
I thought that was a unique kind of perspective.
That's a great question. So, Lisa talked about COVID this morning. We were coming out of COVID on the back of obviously a huge financial crisis. I remember myself and Doug, our CEO, sitting with investors, and they were telling us, how are you going to survive? There may never be another subsea project, ever. Like, holy heck. But we didn't believe that. And we could see just through engagement with our customers and the broader market, we felt like we were going to go into an upcycle. So now, I can say, I am ashamed of it, but our industry, the energy industry, particularly oil and gas industry, through every upcycle has really underdelivered. Every time, the market's grown, we've been unable to meet the demands of the market, and then it's a very cyclical business. So then you go through a cycle, and just when you feel like you're getting on top of things, you go into a downturn, then you're slashing and burning again. So we knew we were going to go into an upcycle, and we were proposing to completely change the way we ran the company as we were going to an upcycle. And back to the meeting where 10% of people said, I'm in, a lot of the people who were not convinced at the time were really questioning the timing. We're about to go into an upcycle, and we want to change the way we work. This is crazy. We argued, if we don't change the way we work, this upcycle is going to look like every other upcycle, and we're going to underperform. So, credit to Doug and the team. They said, no, we're gonna take this leap of faith. And, we're still growing in this upcycle, and, we're delivering on time, on budget, ahead of time, ahead of budget. We've completely changed, I would say, history in terms of how we would perform typically in this type of market environment.
Thanks for sharing that. So I think there are 528 votes for this question, which is, are your Obeya's physical rooms or digital spaces? And can you sort of elaborate on?
They're a mixture of both. Where possible, we'll always prefer to have a physical Obeya. I think it's difficult to replicate the interaction that happens when you all come together to solve a problem. And that's really what the Obeyas are for. It's really, you don't go into the Obeya and focus on the greens, you focus on the reds, and it's about people development. So solving problems, developing people. And you certainly can do that more effectively when you're all together. Now, we're a global company, and we have some teams that are spread across 10 locations. So we also have digital Obeyas. There's lots of different tools you can use. We use Miro just because it's fairly free-form, but we've also used parts of Teams and whiteboards and stuff like that in Teams. So it's a mixture. Our ELT, our executive team, Obeya is a virtual Obeya because there's 6 of us in Houston and 1 in Brazil and 1 in Abu Dhabi. So We do that in the virtual sense, but I would say most of the operational bayers are physical obeyers. If you can have a physical bayer, I think it always works better.
So maybe sort of related to that, I mean, TechnipFMC is a large, globally distributed organization, so you've spoken a little bit about that kind of reality in relationship to your answer to that question. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about just the role that the executive leadership team is having to play in keeping all of this together. I mean, what you're attempting to do is remarkably complex and comprehensive, totally revamping the operating system. What's been the particular kind of role and challenge for the executive leadership team?
Well, I think I'll start with the challenge, Josh, which is, none of us were experts in lean. None of us, we're still not experts in lean, but we know where we know our role in the whole process. So I think leadership commitment cannot be understated. If you don't have leadership commitment, then you will not succeed. And so convincing the rest of the executive team, and then obviously Doug, the CEO, being so committed, making a clear statement to everybody in the company, this is the only way we're going to work, was helpful. But then it's incumbent upon every leadership team to go to the place of work and practice what we preach. Go see, ask why, show respect. And when it comes to problem solving, it's not rocket science to understand that the people who can solve the problems are the ones doing the work. Steve talked about it. Problem solving from the ivory tower of headquarters just doesn't work. So it's really going and visiting the place of work and providing, and despite the fact that we sometimes think we can solve those problems because we're engineers, we can't, but providing the tools and the support for those people to solve the problems is the most important thing.
Great. Another very popular question. How did you teach people to ask the right questions? The person who submitted this says, our red problems almost always come away with lots of action items.
Yeah. Well, we had to learn how to ask the right questions from the people bringing the problems to start with. But then we ended up kind of going to what do people really need help with, and they either need help with, there's a lack of knowledge, they need knowledge, so how can you help them with that? There's a lack of finance or resources, so it's a resource question, or they need a decision. So we had to teach ourselves, and then we had to teach people, when you come to ask for help, you're asking for one of those three things. I need knowledge, I need resources, or I need a decision. And that really helped us in two ways. Helped them ask the right questions, and helped me asking them 15 questions in response. Okay, it's very clear. I need resources, or I need knowledge. We don't have the knowledge for this. Okay, do we have the knowledge in the company? Where can we get that knowledge? Can we apply it to this problem? Or I need a decision. And it's amazing how a lack of decision, how it kind of disables an organization. So we had to get much better at providing decisions. Data-driven as much as possible, but sometimes you don't always have the data. So you do the best you can, but make a decision for them.
So this question, I think, relates to or stems from the comprehensiveness of the effort that you're undertaking. There's interest in learning. How does your company measure employee and leadership engagement?
Yeah, well, so we do a survey every year to measure engagement, and we learn a lot. We learn a lot from that. I have to say, honestly, we get a tremendous response rate. Typically, about 85% of the employees in the company respond to the survey, and it's not an exhaustive survey. If you can ask a 28-question survey, you're not going to get 85% response. I wouldn't respond to it. So we typically ask 3 or 4 really basic questions, and I tend to not focus on the statistics, but we give them the opportunity to write comments, and people are very generous with their comments. I meant to be positive. It was a positive statement. So no, they really are. You go and read the comments, and you learn a lot from that. So we do seek feedback. But honestly, for me, nothing will substitute throwing the boots and hard hat on and getting out into the shop. We're very lucky here in Houston. Our headquarters is adjacent to one of our biggest service locations. So I can go out and walk in the shop every day, and I try to do that. And then when we travel, we go to the shop floor. And it's funny, you know, when you go to the shop the first time, they're like, okay, here comes a guy in shiny coveralls, you know. They're a little bit reluctant. But when you do it every week, and they get to know you, and you get to know their names, and you get to know that they've got 3 kids, and they've got, you know, kid just starting college, and they know that you've got 4 kids, and you got, you know, it's funny how they really start to open up. And again, you know, I started where they started, so I really, I perhaps find it a little bit easier to connect to the people doing the work. And but that's the best way to get feedback. The surveys are great. Use them as you wish, but you know, spend time on the shop floor or wherever the work is performed, and you'll get to learn a lot more.
I get to learn that you like karaoke. Final question. We got 10 seconds here.
Oh yeah.
What are and can we get the 10 rules you referenced?
Oh, the simple big rules. I'm looking at my esteemed colleague Paolo Couto there, who's the author of the simple big rules. I
think he's fielded that request before.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything proprietary.
He's been willing to share only if you do something.
We will happily share the simple big rules. Again, it's not revolutionary. You look at them and you go like, okay, this makes perfect sense. But actually writing them down and give them to every employee in the company and saying this is what we're trying to do is a big help. It's a big help. I'd never travel anywhere without having those in my bag. So
that's good.
Yeah.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks.